Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on wherever you are in the world right now. And thank you once again for joining us at the annual first Fostering Industrial Research Success Together Industry Workshop 2021, organized by the Singapore University of Technology and Design. My name, of course, is Wayne Chan, and it's my pleasure to be your host for this next segment, which is the forum panel discussion. Now, as an institute of higher learning and an autonomous university, SUTD is a vital stakeholder in advancing scientific knowledge and conducting cutting-edge R&D to design tomorrow's technology today. This important work includes the nurturing of a university culture for industry collaboration, which helps to build up technically grounded leaders and innovators with not only the specific skills that companies desire, but also serving societal needs with a holistic understanding of next generation technology. Today, our forum panel will discuss the key ingredients of such university industry collaborations. Our distinguished panel will also debate on upcoming research megatrends and the outlook for Singapore's entrepreneurship and innovation in the next decade. We're honored today to have with us 5 top industry panelists. First of all, we have Celestine Khoo, Senior Director, Venture Innovation and Entrepreneurship, SUTD. Ms. Khoo leads the Venture, Innovation and Entrepreneurship initiatives at SUTD. She supports founders, faculty and researchers as they launch their startups and spin-offs and facilitate partnerships with investors, government and corporate partners in the startup community. She has co-founded a startup and is also an independent director of Far East Hospitality Trust and serves on the investment committees of several non-profit organizations. Celestine, can you just give us a wave to our audience? Thank you so much for joining us, Celestine. We're also delighted to have with us Eugene Wee, Director, Enterprise Division A-Star. Mr. Wee leads the A-Star's Venture and Creation Growth Division. Now, prior to his current appointment, he headed Accelerate Venture Creation Private Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary of A-Star. He has also held roles in corporate governance, policy, and business development at Accelerate, the marketing and commercialization arm of A-Star. Eugene, thank you so much for joining us. We also want to warmly welcome the Chief Executive Officer of Huawei International, Nicholas Ma. Now, prior to his current role as CEO, Mr. Ma was the Deputy CEO of Huawei Philippines from 2014 to 2018, Vice President of Global Wireless Marketing and Solutions Sales Department in Huawei's HQ in Shenzhen, and Head for Wireless Marketing and Solutions Sales Department of Huawei's India Region Office from 2008 to 2011. Very delighted to have you with us today, Nicholas. Give us a wave if you can. Thank you so much. We are also very pleased to have with us Jeremy Sim, now absorbed by the world, reshaped by climate and cybernetics rather. Mr. Sim is the director of the civilizational prototyping lab Audacity or Off Habit, and concurrently creative director of the venture builder Mistletoe. He was a lead administrator for the EU ERD Industrial Innovation Network in Nordic Europe and the British Isles. He has also served various consulting roles in Berlin, Beijing, Abu Dhabi, and Hanoi, including collaborations with G7, G20 chair Hans Eichel. And finally, we're also grateful to have with us Hema Lada Anamalai, founder UniConnect Private Limited, a company that serves the talent acquisition needs of the electronics and semiconductor industries. Hema is passionate about creating jobs and empowering engineers at all levels. As a serial entrepreneur, she has spent many years creating and driving entrepreneurial ventures in varied industries spanning professional services, electronics, travel, and electric vehicles. Thank you so much to all our panelists for taking the time off your busy schedules to join us here today. Now, there's so many factors that contribute to successful university-industry collaboration and challenges as well to make the most of these opportunities. to get our exciting discussion going. We want to start off with our first question for everyone, and it's this: what can startup SMEs across a broad spectrum of industries do to cultivate a resilient talent pipeline? Let's start with Nicholas Ma. Nicholas, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, thank you, Win. About these questions, I want to share some input based on our experience to build and enhance a resilient talent pipeline. First of all, building a resilient talent pipeline is not just a matter for startups and SMEs. It requires a united effort from both industry and academia. The industry player should take the initiative in establishing close communications and cooperation with the education sector to keep the institutes of the higher learning updated of the industry requirement on needed talent, which will ensure talent supply is aligned with demands. Meanwhile, the education sector should do the same to embrace the industry and promote close cooperation between the business, education, and research. SUTD first, it's a good idea to exchange platform. This exchange platform to bring people from industry and academy to pay attention and discuss the talent topic. Secondly, while as a local enterprise, always will emphasize on the cultivating talents based on our own technical advantages. As a large company, we believe that we should give full play to our advantage of being a platform and our ability to help the industry players. We would like to output a comprehensive requirement looking after both short-term and mid to long-term demand. Establish a long-term collaboration mechanism with IHS, build a platform covering hardware and software that could contribute to the industry ecosystem and the university in implementing and strengthening talent development as well as the industry innovation. By doing so, we wish to construct a cooperative ecosystem that could benefit all parties. Currently, we have jointly built ICT college with 7 local IHLs in Singapore. And also we launched our AI lab and the DGS lab in 2019 and 2021. It's also important, this too is important facility furthering the cooperation with university industry association and existing partners. In 2022, we also have launched our we call it ICT, Virtual ICT Academy, offering over 140 free courses for the public to learn by themselves. At the meantime, we provided entry-level courses in 5 domains on the Singapore National Learning Platform, My Skill Future. Meanwhile, we have designed customized talent training courses in various fields, including the cloud, the network infrastructure, AI, launched the talent program, aiming at cooperate with ecosystem partners to cultivate the 1,000 professional for Singapore ICT industry in the next 3 years. This is a very important program we just launched recently. We hope all this kind of effort will be supported and assisted by the Singapore IHLs as well as the relevant startups and SMEs, because it's really we're trying to help all the players in the industry also. When
Thank you so much, Nicholas. That was really a very comprehensive overview, and I'm sure our viewers truly benefited from that very, very comprehensive answer. Hema, I'd like to throw the question over to you. What would you like to add to that point?
Yeah. Nicholas spoke about largely from a large corporation's point of view. I would like to speak from a real startup, viewpoint, Wayne. Startups are typically in a hurry, right? So they usually hire for ability, capability, and maybe less for attitude. Okay. And the startups and SMEs are always chasing two things from experience. One is sales, the other one is cash flow. They do this because after the viability of the business model and the revenue models are established. So when it is neck to neck and hand to mouth, the founding team has to be absolutely be prudent and careful to be able to build a resilient talent pipeline, right? So I would like to quote three or four things what they can do. One is actually focus on the internal resource because that's a low hanging fruit, which means uh, make the best possible way to at least get a dual skilled in terms of the resources, and at least if not multi skilled, right? So what happens is that the moment you are actually having dual skills, what we should do that is we should actually focus on these people with which who have a greater attitude aptitude to learn, right? They should be singled out and rotated in a planned manner through different short-term projects and crisis situations, because then these people will be ready for taking up new projects, new roads, and when there are emergencies. So the first thing is focusing on the in-house resources, right? The second one is creating powerful internship and also live project programs, because the moment you have project managers have the candidates to solve problem, they also understand about the candidate, their cultural fitment and their ability to solve problems. So this is actually the managers getting a test drive of a car, before actually owning the car, right? So that's going to be very useful. And of course, the project managers get risk mitigated talent, and these are the assets that can actually the company can consider to be hiring them for a full-time job, right? And from the intern's point of view, the intern also knows the company very well, so he or she will make a calculated decision to join the company. So the advantage is less attrition. So it is actually a win-win proposal, for both the company as well as the startup and the, and the employee, right? And lastly, of course, systematic reviews through Google OKRs, which is basically objectives and key results area. Because when you kind of have a quarterly review, it becomes very easy, and then mid way course correction is possible. So this is the third thing. And the last is, of course, to build a strong and incentivized referral network. Because when you have a strong network who can continuously refer, you also not only understand what's happening around the competition, and also you're able to create a goodwill with your current employees. I think so. These are the four methods where organizations will be able to build a very resilient talent pipeline. Because one right talent in the company is so important, because that can make or break, right? Particularly for startups and scale ups, right? Because the resources are very scarce, right? So they have to be very careful. So I think these are the three or four methods I would suggest, Wayne.
Thank you so much, Hema. I really love all your suggestions. It really, really sounds so interesting, and there's so much for our audience to digest and pick off that. And talking about digesting and picking off that, I want to throw the question I just asked to both Eugene or Germany. Either of you guys can go next. And what do you all think about some of these suggestions and inputs from Nicholas and Hema? Maybe starting with Eugene.
Sure. Happy to add on to that, Wayne. First of all, thank you so much for introducing us and giving us such a warm welcome. I would say the first thing I wanted to add, and I've probably only got 2 points. The first one, adding to Nicholas Ma's point on the need for greater coordination at the national level, I would say that I think we're incredibly fortunate in Singapore that there is actually coordination that happens at the national level between the ministries of trade and industry, the Ministry of Education, and the ministries of manpower. So with the Economic Development Board, we are constantly looking at what industry needs and how we can better shape our education, how we can better shape the manpower needs, so that they fulfill the needs of industry. So that's the first thing I wanted to add. So I think we're very fortunate to be able to do that in Singapore in a very concerted manner. The second thing I wanted to add to Hima's list of with very wonderful and very apt methods to build a resilient pipeline, I would say the one thing that I would add to that is that if you want to look at building a resilient pipeline of talent, you don't always have to do it entirely by yourself. I'm a strong believer in open innovation. And as such, I think one of the things that we need to be able to look at is leveraging the talent that exists within the autonomous universities, the institutes of higher learning here in Singapore, as well as research institutes, right, such as A-Star. And the idea is that we do plenty of research. There's a lot of development work that's going on as well. why not just don't be overly self-reliant? I think it's important to be self-reliant, but it's also important to be able to leverage the wider ecosystem. So look at the capabilities that exist within the research institutes at A-Star. Look at what happens within the universities. If there are researchers, if there is talent that exists within the universities, I think all the autonomous universities and IHLs as well as A-Star are willing to collaborate with companies. And I think that's how you maximize talent potential within Singapore, especially when it's so finite.
Thank you so much, Eugene. I really love all of those suggestions as well. And I can see both Jeremy and Celestine smiling away as you were answering. So I'm sure some of those created a few light bulbs in their minds. Jeremy or Celestine, would you all have anything to add to this question about how startups and SMEs, how can they, across a broad spectrum of industries, do to, or what can they do to cultivate a resilient talent pipeline?
Celestine, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I agree with my fellow panelists, and especially, Eugene, when you talked about, nurturing the talent. Here I'm talking about nurturing the bilingual talent who have both the technological as well as business expertise. And I'll speak from the point of view of SUTD, where we place a lot of focus on this. Like, we have an interdisciplinary curriculum with a hands-on learning environment that concludes in a capstone design program. So every year, final year students from different majors, they come together in teams, and then they contribute their tech know-how and design expertise to solve real-world challenges faced by our industry partners. So for example, like last year, despite the pandemic, we had a total of 63 projects and 44 participating industry partners. And this year we have more than 70 projects. So if you look at it, this is just one sort of area where we try to nurture bilingual talent and getting the students out there to work on real world life challenges. Yep. Jeremy, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a brilliant sequence. We started with the largest companies, then we went to the startups, and then we are talking about university students, which is kind of like an area which is very close to my heart. I cannot speak for a large spectrum of industries because we are focused mostly on the radical impact venture space. We try to create an environment that rewards key founder traits, right? And we prefer to start very young in university, like SUTD. That's a great time to start, or even earlier, high school. We have some pretty interesting innovators in their teenage years. Perhaps the most important quality that I try to encourage in the environment that we create is to have a vision. I think the talent in Singapore tends to be very intelligent. They're tech savvy. And I think what we don't spend enough time is nurturing their ability to zoom out and see the big picture. I think if you overemphasize specialization, sometimes you end up with very intelligent people who lack real meaningful vision. Right? I think another quality that we try to encourage is organizational talent, the ability to build collaborations. It's a ways when you meet otherwise brilliant people who lack meaningful collaboration skills that makes it more difficult to fulfill their true potential. I think the story of evolution is the story of people learning to collaborate in ever increasing numbers and complexity. A few million years ago, our ape ancestors would live together in small units, and it took hundreds of thousands of years for them to learn to form tribes. And then a few thousand years ago, we formed cities. And nation states are still a relatively new thing, like for the last 1 or 2 centuries, right? So now we are going through this geopolitical kind of like transitions, which I think is part of the movement towards something grander than the nation state. So I'm a firm believer that the ability to build ever-larging collaborations is very important. And then the final quality, I think, is learning how to get up when you fail. I think in Singapore, sometimes we're very smart. We go out of our way to avoid failure, which is a missed learning opportunity. I think there's a lot you learn from failure. So we need to learn how to embrace failure. We need to learn how to embrace getting up again. We need to embrace the struggle. Embrace how to make the best possible moves when there's no good moves left to you. I think that's an amazing skill to have. Yeah, I think that's our focus at Audacity.
Absolutely amazing. I just love that whole spiel that you had there, Jeremy, giving a historical perspective on the growth of collaboration among people, among nations, among all the big organizations across the globe. It's really interesting, and that really crossfades nicely to our next question, which is, what are some considerations in collaborations between startups and academia? Let's start with Hema. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay. See, the products or services that are getting developed these days are becoming faster, better, cheaper, right? So there are several considerations, but I think the key ones will be to make it build a clear but a simple rules of collaboration. You know, if you make it very complex, it becomes very difficult for the startups. So one of the thing is that the first, I mean, this is from my practical experience. I feel that startups may not, want to invest in expensive tools until the viability is established. You know, because I have seen that startups raise money and very quickly go into committing expensive tools and licenses and all that, which I kind of feel that maybe they shouldn't rush to do it, because you should preserve your cash, and that's why there are universities, particularly in Singapore. The universities are very collaborative, and you should kind of please work with the dean to be able to get those tools for your organization to collaborate, because until viability is established, you're not very sure where the revenue will come from, because you're still figuring out in the first 2 to 3 years. Yeah, that was the first point. And the second point is that I'm not sure whether this is possible, but one of the points is that whether a master's or a PhD student, can be considered for a 1 year assignment into startups. Maybe are they given credit for their course? We don't know yet. I think maybe Eugene can answer that later. So I think that it will be very, very good, because in the pandemic times, because most of the startups are cash strapped, so it will be very nice where the government can look into allowing the startups to engage a master's or a PhD, prof who has the expertise on the project where the startup is doing. Yeah. So these are the two things, and the last is, of course, engaging with universities to leverage their intellectual property, because sometimes we could share the intellectual property. Academia can actually get the patent right, but then the sub-licensing rights can be with the startup, and this can be done with some kind of time bound revenue shared model. Okay. Because in Singapore's context is already allowed, where they pay one time royalty or some royalty to be able to leverage the IPs. But the key is actually to make it very simple and less rigid, and more with more flexibility, because the entrepreneurs have to be supported. It has to be adapted. You have to close it in a manner where the entrepreneur or the startup or the SME is supported, and the SME must be enabled. So it is very important. So I think these are my views, Wayne, in terms of how we can collaborate.
Thank you so much, Hema. That was truly very, very insightful. Celestine, are there any other considerations or inputs that you'd like to add to expand on Hema's points?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. I'd just like to add on that as a starting point, it'll be good to first explore what resources and expertise the parties bring to the table and what the desired outcomes are. So if you look at a few considerations, like first, what's the objective of the collaboration to the startup and to the researcher? Like, are the two objectives achievable at the same time? And then if you look at the success of the collaboration, how is it going to be measured to both the startup and the researcher as well? And are the two measurements consistent or contradictory? And third, if looking at the startup, does it have enough runway to deliver on the collaboration's goals? And on the researchers' end, is the budget that they are allocating sufficient to achieve the goals of the collaboration? Because from experience, the common denominator between researchers and startups is innovation and raising funds, right? Researchers raise funds to support the continuity of their research, while startups raise funds to support the continuity of their business and growth. But startups generally, they come with very specific needs for their product pipelines, and cost and timing are also major concerns. So finding that right match of skills and requirements is actually very important. The other thing is that startups will have investors behind them and various funding rounds that could impact the dynamics of the collaboration. So for instance, they often want to move fast, But we all know that, it takes time to execute good agreements and develop good working relationships. So, it's good to come in at the collaboration at the start with some of these, points in mind.
Thank you so much, Lestin. Like, that was really, truly helpful and much to consider for those who want to create these collaborations between startups and academia. Now, I wonder if the other panelists have anything to add to this. Nicholas, Eugene, and Jeremy, do you have anything to add to that point?
I'll go. Yeah, I think the kind of startups that work best with academia, from what I've seen, are the very early stage, even like pre-startups, right? Like kind of during the ideation phase, like pre-startups, or more mature startups. I think more mature startups, the route is already quite well established. Relatively speaking, I'd like to address more the pre-startups, which are kind of the startups that will be born out of universities, right? And I think one thing that I do see is that our students have a very heavy course load, right? We tend to be quite demanding taskmasters. So if there's a way that we could kind of give them, like a rigorous education, but not overload it, create as much free space and creativity time as possible to let them explore, I think that's quite useful. And in some ways, that's what SUTD is known for, right? So I think SUTD is a true a pioneer and trailblazer, and we all should hope that it succeeds in its mission. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And that leads us to our next question, which I'm going to throw to Eugene to start off. And this question is, how can startups or local enterprises better leverage on university and the local research ecosystem? Eugene, starting off with you, what are your thoughts?
Wow, that's a really big question, Wayne. I would say that there's really an incredible wide spectrum of activity that's available, and that startups and local enterprises can participate in when it comes to engaging the universities as well as the local research ecosystem. How can they do it? I would say, first of all, one of the key problem statements I wanted to highlight was really a lack of awareness on the various schemes and activities that's happening throughout the local ecosystem. I think it's important for startups to spend a little bit of time in studying and understanding where the capabilities exist, what the various schemes are, and basically study for themselves and understand what's best for them when it comes to engaging the local ecosystem. And so, building on that point, I would say that it's important not to think about just doing things by yourself. So it's not always just about a one-on-one relationship between NewCo within local enterprise and a principal investigator in one of the research institutes. I think it's important to be able to then leverage the wider ecosystem, right? So I'll give you an example of that. And of course, an A-star example comes to mind. There is a national platform called the Diagnostics Development Hub. Now, that's a platform that really looks at helping local enterprises productize in the field of diagnostics. And if we use the recent COVID-19 example as how we've developed not only the capabilities to help bring the technologies downstream in terms of technology development, but also in terms of productization, i.e., seeking regulatory approvals, looking at how we can help manufacturers scale up, doing the quality management systems, and so on and so forth. Things that are actually important, not only for technologies, but for products and services that need to be in the market. Then we need to be able to leverage platforms such as those to really bring the technologies to the market. And so with that, with the Diagnostics Development Hub, we've seen several startups of ours that were able to see technologies move all the way from the laboratory into the market, right? So some of the test kits that you've seen in the papers over the last year or so really have flown through the entire process, leveraging the expertise that exists in the entire ecosystem. So I would say A-star universities can play the role of convener, and there are so many platforms. I actually would like some of my other panelists to jump in and highlight some of the platforms they're familiar with. One of the other platforms I wanted to highlight was ACCM. So it's called the A-Star Collaborative Commerce Marketplace. So if you go to accm.a-star.edu.sg, you'll be able to engage with not only A-star researchers, but there are about 1,500 companies from throughout the local ecosystem that you can engage through this platform. So the question is about finding out what's available and engaging not just one, but also an entire ecosystem. Another scheme that maybe is worth mentioning, and I think Hima alluded to this earlier, was this idea of talent flow. And something that exists in the local ecosystem, not just with A-Star, but also the local universities, is this idea of tee-up. So you can basically take a researcher that currently resides within the university or within the local research institute and have them seconded to your company, right, to fulfill some of the technology development needs that you may have. And these are just a couple of examples of some of the many schemes that already exist. But one of the one of the things that I need to encourage a little more is maybe the creation of awareness of some of these things.
That is absolutely on point, Eugene. I got to say it's true. There are just so many schemes, so many platforms, so many initiatives out there, but sometimes just a lack of awareness that stops people from leveraging on them. And talking about all of that, I wonder if our other panelists have anything to add. What are some of the other ways, the other ideas, some of the other opportunities, that people can leverage on as terms of startups or local enterprises in terms of university and the local research ecosystem? Nicholas and Jeremy, would you all have anything to add to that? Maybe starting with Nicholas, would you have anything to say from your perspective on how startups or local enterprises can better leverage on university-led or the local research ecosystem?
I think I just add a very simple point is the startup just try to make best use of all the possible platform and associate in the industry to resource to facilitate your innovation or your solution and product. That's very important. And then you try to contribute. Of course, you take something from the ecosystem and also you need contribute to the whole ecosystem with the best product also, but also some sorts, not only in the product for the commercial stuff, also some sorts and some like the software stuff and the algorithm or the ecosystem stuff, not only the firm stuff. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for that answer. And of course, there's still so much more that we have to discuss on this lovely morning or afternoon or evening, depending where you are. We're going to move on to the next question, which is what are the emerging trends apart from the traditional industry academia partnerships, which have been relatively successful? Some examples we have are corporate internships, work study programs, curriculum advisory boards, guest lectureships, capstone courses, and the list goes on. So, what are the emerging trends apart from the traditional industry academia partnerships, which have been relatively successful? Let's start with Celestine. Celestine, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. I talked just now about nurturing this bilingual talent who have both technological and business expertise, and the other way is really working with students as well as other universities globally and the startup ecosystem. So how we do that, apart from the capstone projects that I mentioned just now, is also this SUTD Tech Entrepreneurship Program, where students in this program gain from majoring in a specialized tech field, combined with a 1-year immersion in different startup ecosystems globally. And then another trend that we see is collaborating with strategic partners in focus areas. So through our collaboration with the SingHealth regional health systems, we work with clinicians from 12 SingHealth entities in joint research and innovation projects, as well as curriculum activities. So this includes things like co-development of courses, adjunct appointments, student mentorships, and internships at Changi General Hospital. We also conduct joint grant calls to support the translation of SUTD CGH joint IP. And you probably have read recently in the news about this joint development of the B-Watch sensor. So it's this wireless lightweight device that's placed over a patient's bandage to detect real-time bleeding from wounds after invasive procedures. And it's been patented in Singapore and the US. And then another example of strategic partnerships is our collaboration with Enterprise Singapore to launch the Startup SG Founder Venture Building Program. So this program is to groom aspiring entrepreneurs to build and scale innovative startups. And at last count, together with the other universities, this program has supported more than 300 participants to become entrepreneurs. The other thing that came out very recently was EDB that announced, they launched this corporate venture launchpad program to help companies launch new ventures. And we're also in discussions with some of these corporate venture units because they are always on the lookout for researchers and entrepreneurs to help them grow their businesses in new directions so that they can fend off the smaller, more innovative competitors. And there are also other ecosystem nodes that we work with. So, for example, Eugene just now talked about A-Star's platform. There's also like IMDA and CapitaLand and other organizations that now use open innovation systems for real commercial pilots and testbed solutioning. So I'd say that the traditional industry academia partnership is really evolving into a very exciting space.
Truly, there's just so much to look forward to, so many interesting trends, and so many ways that we can have all of these industry academia partnerships. And I want to move on to Eugene. Eugene, what do you have to add to this question? What are some of these emerging trends that you're seeing that have been relatively successful?
I think in the interest of time, perhaps one of the things that I'll do is just focus on one of the things that I've seen to be incredibly successful in facilitating partnerships between enterprises as well as the universities and the local research ecosystem, and that is in consortium. So A-Star has been doing this maybe over the last 10 years or so, and what we've seen is that when you bring together like-minded companies, you're then able to look across a broad spectrum of problem statements that maybe exist across all the different companies, right? And typically you don't have conversations with your competitors on what the key problems are, especially when it comes to talent or when it comes to technology development. But bringing together a consortia of players who are in peripheral industries really allows a lot of these problem statements to percolate upwards. And when we are able to bring together all these players onto a table to discuss their problem statements, then too comes the solutioning, right? So I think ultimately what we've seen as being a big success is bringing people together. And in so doing, what you also then see is that if you've got MNCs that have got problem statements, especially when it comes to issues along their supply chain, for example, then we can see a lot of local enterprises coming in as well, developing their capabilities to fit the needs of these multinationals that we're engaging. So again, it's not just about how universities can address some of these problem statements, but also how some companies within some of these ecosystems are also able to respond to some of the other companies. You know what I mean? So it's about bringing together different people, different resources, different skill sets, and talking about problems together and solving them together. I think that's been incredibly successful for us. What then happens after those conversations is that it also generates the opportunity for bilateral agreements, right, or research collaborations, either between multinational and local enterprise, or within the enterprises and with one of the research institutes or universities. So that's something that's been incredibly valuable for us, something that I strongly encourage all our listeners, whether it's in enterprise or whether it's in local research institutions, to also participate in.
That's really, really amazing, Eugene. And I think some of the things that you said about bringing together people to meet specific needs or solve specific problems faced by the industry is something that's truly what we want to look at in our next question as well. And it's really perfectly ties up our next question, which is for Hema. And the question is this: students must look at solving problems of the emerging developing economies as massive disruption is visible in many segments. How can universities achieve this systematically? Hammer, what are your thoughts?
Um, I will only share a personal anecdote here. Is that see, I was mentored by Prof. Hang Chang Chie. He's from NUS, and he's one of the pioneers in disruptive innovation. Okay, and when I was mentored by him, he said, "Hey, Ma, you just have to read this book, The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen." And then, I mean, it just opened up a completely new perspective on how disruption is happening in varied industries. For example, in if you look at emerging economies, there's no fixed telephony at all. It's completely replaced by mobile telephony, right? It's completely gone. So we have leapfrogged. One technology is completely gone. So like that, even if you look at it here within the pandemic times, we are having a situation where the online digital marketplace is going to really play a very significant part. In developing economies is normally called the convenience sector, right? Where the convenience economy is actually going to, dictate many things in terms of how the user wanted to conduct himself, the lifestyle change itself, right? So I feel that this disruption is going to really kind of, completely overhaul the industry. For example, in our own industry, if you look at electronics and semiconductors, even in the assembly, the fab side, right? With the advent of 5G, with the advent of artificial intelligence, there are new ways of thinking happening, right? With sensors, etc. Because the old ways where it was largely human centric, people centric, are now will be targeted to run with less resources, right? Which means more tech, deep tech coming into play. So I think that every sector should watch for disruption coming in, and that is one of the reasons I feel that academia will be able to supplement that thinking, for a startup or a mid-sized enterprise to be able to understand what are the new trends, technologies that actually will come, and whereby we can take an advantage of kind of understanding it in a much better manner, because the SME will not have as much of bandwidth to be able to understand what's happening. So that is why the university collaboration will be able to help understand the changing mega trends that's going to happen. I think it's completely I would say that it's going to be very intense. There are a lot of companies. I mean, even if you take the mobile telephony, for example, Nokia missed the smartphone wave, right? And other companies, caught up. New companies like Apple came up in a very, very big manner, right? I mean, this is all very rudimentary, but then these are the fundamentals by which disruptive companies shall rule the space, and that is something that I feel that the SMEs should have a very, very strong consideration. Otherwise they will focus on creating something and they will miss the bus in front of their own eyes.
Thank you so much, Hema, for that very, very exciting and insightful inputs into that question. And as you mentioned, we are now in the midst of a pandemic, and it's a time whereby we need extra support for our startups. So my next question is, how do we
Oh,
provide? Uh,
sorry,
yes,
can I just add to Hima's point? Because I felt like there was an
please
area that's
do.
close to my heart as well. Yeah. So at Mistletoe and Audacity, we tend to focus on emerging markets, and we have a great example of a startup that kind of answers this question really well. It was a drone delivery startup founded about 6 years ago. It's called Zipline, right? So we were the angel investor. We wrote the first check. And it was trying to do drone deliveries. I think the founders were American, right? And they were looking at what could you do in the US, and he was like, oh yeah, you could deliver alcohol, for people who want to get drunk in a hurry. But then ultimately, they decided a more natural market was to get to a space where there was no good logistics network, and they finally settled on Africa, delivering critical medical supplies in Africa, right? So over a few years, 3 years, they became the kind of like the biggest medical supply network in Africa. And then from there, they had a pickup in the US. Walmart, Temasek became their latest round of investors. They are actually our newest unicorn. And they've gone from establishing themselves in Africa to becoming the biggest challenger to Amazon delivery in the US, which is a great example of how something that can be kind of like conceptualized in a more mature market, kind of rolled out in the emerging world, and then come back to a developed market to kind of disrupt the existing incumbents. Yeah. So we would like to see a lot more of these kind of startups, actually.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And of course, that was a really great addition to what Hammer has said. And how do we provide though strong startup support in the midst of a pandemic? For example, in terms of mentorship. Nicholas, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on this question.
Okay. Firstly, I really want to align to confirm the trends in the Asia Pacific region. The first one is SME really are the engine of the growth and the innovation in the Asia Pacific region. They account for about the 97% of the all business and they employ over half of the workforce in this region. The second, everybody already know that, right? The pandemic already forced all the business to accelerate their digital transformation and move to the cloud few years ahead of schedule. These two trends is very important for my coming suggestion and comments. I want to share that what we are doing from this perspective. As an ICT player and enabler, Huawei, we have striving to activate some cooperation in the industry ecosystem on a larger scale and to strive to provide startup and SME with an industry cooperation ecosystem, hardware platform, cloud and AI software platform, and also industry experience sharing worldwide. And then in addition, we have our cloud and HMS. These two big platforms are used to enable the startup and SME in different progress across the sell-in, sell-with, and sell-through. Based on this effort, we can create an environment and a platform for startup and SME covering the full industry chain from innovation, marketing, revenue generation, and also ecosystem cooperation, which all important for the startup. And meanwhile, very recently, we are offered two dedicated programs for SME and the startup, which is really meaningful for the startup SME in this pandemic time. The first one we call is the SME support program, which was launched in April this year by our Asia Pacific Cloud. It's aimed to provide technical support to SME to survive through the pandemic. For example, the eligible company will receive free professional consulting service, including the cutting-edge cloud solutions for different industry scenarios. The other one is known as we call is Huawei Spark, which is a deep tech accelerator, was launched last year. Spark providing the financial support, training, resource, mentoring, technical support, and the go-to-market support to all the participant startup also. All this we have done in the past years and months, and of course we are trying to do more to collaborate with startup SME in this special period also.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. And I really love all the different ways that your team and is actually supporting startups, and especially in the midst of a pandemic. There's so many opportunities out there. And Eugene, what about on your end? What are some of these strong startup support schemes that you like to talk to that they can take advantage of in the midst of a pandemic?
So thanks for that, Wayne. I think, well, like I mentioned, the illustrious panelists before you have already alluded to many of the things that can go towards helping a startup in a pandemic. In my mind, if I were to think of the largest problems that face startups today, it would be to a certain extent, access to capital. Although one would argue that actually during the pandemic, there hasn't been a shortage or there hasn't been a pullback in terms of investments in startups. But still, I think access to capital for the individual startup is a bit of a problem. Second is access to customers. And I think Nicholas alluded to this, and I think it's incredibly important for startups to be able to find a way to engage customers, even very early on in their journey. The third thing in my mind that's critically important is access to talent, and I think Hima alluded to this earlier. But I would say that different startups do have different talent needs. A lot of the startups that are perhaps coming out from local research institutes, local research entities, they come from the best research minds in the world. But that doesn't necessarily translate to all of them being able to attract follow-on funding in terms of investments, being able to engage customers, and so on and so forth. So there's a need, and I think Celestine alluded to this, to have bilingual talent, the ability not only to understand the technology, but also to understand the business. So if you look at the trifecta of biggest issues that are facing our startups today, there are various schemes that have been put in place. I would say that for talent, I alluded to TIAP earlier, the ability to second, whether it's researchers into businesses or other similar schemes like that. And we talk about mentorship. I think all the IHLs, universities have got various mentorship programs that allow communities to engage with the startups. It's especially important when mentorship comes from organizations such as Huawei, where we are able to look at connecting large enterprises together with our startups. So there are all those schemes that exist. I would say when it comes to capital, Enterprise Singapore has done a sterling job in being able to either co-fund or facilitate all these various things and programs. I encourage you to look up Enterprise Singapore's website for the various schemes that are available to new startups. And when it comes to access to customers, I would say that is perhaps one of the biggest challenges that we face. At A-Star, one of the things that we are doing is engaging, because we do about 1,500 industry engagements a year. The idea is to work with all these large companies, these multinational corporations, and see if, in fact, some of their problem statements can be responded to with the startup ecosystem. And so it's about, again, convening an ecosystem where we are able to respond to the problem statements of one company with the skills and capabilities that exist within other companies, including startups. So I think that's some examples of schemes that are available to address the current problem statements. I would say one of the things that's interesting and that we've been toying with over the last couple of years at A-Star is taking it even one step further, acknowledging that there are these three problem statements that are likely to arise as a startup grows. What we're looking is doing venture co-creation. So we're looking at the investment community, private equity investors, local enterprise, multinational corporations to work with us to see if in fact we want to or are able to co-create startups together. So immediately when you've got a corporation that's coming in and engaging with researchers to co-create a startup, that already addresses the problem of talent, because we are bringing in the talent that exists within the enterprise or the venture capital or the private equity companies or the venture builders. So hint, Jeremy, if you want to come on board and build something with us, quite open to that as well. Same with everyone present here. So addressing talent is one thing. Access to market, again, venture capitalists, multinational corporations, local enterprises already have access to a broad customer base, right? And it's about letting the startup tap onto that customer base that I think is critically important. And with that, automatically follows follow-on funding. So I think again, it's about addressing this trifecta. There are schemes in place to address them downstream if the startup has already been created. But why not think about working together with the local research ecosystem and co-create these companies at the get-go?
Truly, there's so many opportunities out there that startups can leverage on in terms of partnerships with the university. And one of the resources that universities do make available to startups is academic research. Now, academic research focuses on long-term challenges and thus may sometimes move slower, whereas industrial R&D is driven by time-sensitive product development projects. So my next question for Nicholas is, how do we navigate through these and come up with a win-win solution? Nicholas, what are your thoughts on this question?
We firmly believe that the innovation is fundamental for the survival and also future development for all the players in the industry. Of course, for startup, usually they focus on the innovation also. For Huawei, in the last 3 decades, we take us as an example. We focus a lot on the innovation, and also that is our core competitiveness of our company. In the early stage of Huawei, we focus on the rapid innovation on products, solutions, and technologies that could meet the market needs and bring the commercial value and the benefits to us in the short to mid term. As our business expand, that is definitely the startup SME will follow the same way. Or when we grew into a leaders in a certain field, the importance of the basic research and the innovation amplified. Therefore, that's why we have invest 10 to 16% of our sales revenue into the R&D on a yearly basis in the past decade. Our R&D expense, as you know, in 2020 reached about the $22 billion US dollars, which are about the 60% of the total revenue. That means this kind of the R&D investment definitely not only on the short-term investment, also the long-term also. And we believe that the global and open cooperation innovation can create more value for the industry and academia. And Huawei has established research and innovation partnership with more than 300 IHLs and 900 research institutes and firms around the world. Following the principle of open innovation, we will leverage global innovation resource and attract global professionals to collaborate on research. We definitely will consider the challenge that business and academia will face in the future. In Singapore, we are doing the same way. We work closely with top university to carry out the fundamental research and the cutting-edge tech innovations. And meanwhile, we also try to accelerate the engineering and application level innovations with Poly. In total, it's definitely this long-term and short-term, you must find the suitable and best partners in the right time.
Thank you so much. And I think we've just reached the end of time. So I'm going to end off today's forum panel discussion with this question. And of course, panelists, you can also add on any other thoughts that you might want to add on based on some of the inputs that were discussed earlier. If there are any points that you feel that you want to bring up in your last comments for today, please bring it up as well. But the question is, all right, what is your hope or vision for the future of university industry collaboration? Your wish list of what you'd like to see in the future. Let us start with Jeremy. What is your hope and vision for the future of university industry collaboration? What do you want to see?
Thank you so much. I'd like to work with the universities of Singapore to produce a very consistent pipeline of talent which we already have, with vision and integrity. I think vision and integrity is still a bit dormant. We have it, but we need to actualize it, right? I absolutely believe the next decade or two is going to be a golden era for startups in Singapore and Southeast Asia. There's going to be so much money chasing so few ideas and so few good people. So let's work together to build up more amazing talent that are multi-dimensional. And I think that would serve the country and the region in very good stead. Yeah, and that's my hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, and we hope that there's really going to be a golden era as well over the next 20 years. I'm sure everyone is looking forward to that. What about you, Hammer? What are you hoping to see for the future of university industry collaborations?
I mean, I completely agree with what Jeremy said, because the next decade will belong to entrepreneurs, startups. I mean, there are a lot of problems to solve for the community, for the society in general. And one of the areas where I see massive impact can happen is through disruption, right? And most of the disruption, if you look at the characteristics of disruption, they are not top down, they are bottom up. Because they are bottom up, you always start with products that are only good enough. You don't have to really do cutting edge design. You don't have to spend a lot of money on research and all that, right? You can start with what is good enough. So I wanted the universities to be able to create students that are looking at working with ambiguity, right? Because you can't have a very fixed models, fixed ideation stage, right? So it is going to be very pertinent for students to be able to understand how to create new markets. So I think that is my wish list for the academia, to be able to create students with an inquisitive mind, with a mind to work in ambiguity, and with a mind to be able to also focus on emerging economies, because there's some reservation for people here. When you look at looking at economies to work in Africa or China or India, I think here there is a reservation with people's mind. I think that reservation should go off, and people should be able to try all these different ideas that's going to happen, because whilst idea can emerge from Singapore, the execution should happen in places where Singapore can impact these emerging economies in a larger manner. I think those are my views, Wayne.
Thank you so much, Hema. And of course, I think what you mentioned about emerging economies is something that we all need to think about and look at as well. And I'm sure Nicholas would have more to add to that. Nicholas, can you share with us your hope or vision for the future of university industry collaboration? What do you want to see?
I hope we can definitely can do more collaboration with university, poly, and also the whole ecosystem players. With a joint effort, we hope that Singapore, the whole ecosystem, can be a flagship model among the global presence within Huawei. Also, I want, with our continuous effort, I want Huawei can be a very good brand, a very good local corporate within the Singapore ecosystem, and contribute more on the talent, innovation, and also contribute more commercial and social value to the SME and the startup also.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for sharing that. We're going to move on to Celestine. Celestine, what about you? Your hope or
Yeah.
vision for the future of university industry collaborations? What's your wish list?
Yeah, my wish list is very simple. It's continuing to nurture and enlarge the pool of bilingual talent that really pushes the envelope in various ways, and ultimately to serve the community. Thanks.
Where you commute,
You're muted.
your mute yourself.
You're muted.
Oh, so sorry. I just got too excited by Celestine's and all the other panelists' answers. That was really short and sweet, and of course, very impactful as well, Celestine. And we're going to round off this discussion with Eugene's take on what he hopes to see for the future of university industry collaboration.
Thanks, Wayne. I think if I had a wish list of a couple of things, I would say two things. First of all, when it comes to open innovation, as Nicholas alluded to earlier, it's about having everyone embrace this idea, right? So open innovation is not just about innovation that happens in isolation within the R&D facilities of a multinational corporation. It really is about having your corporations, your enterprises embrace the innovation that's happening in the universities, that's happening with research institutes all across the globe. And I really would like for everyone to embrace that. Not only corporations to embrace this idea of open innovation, but also researchers to do this, right? I think more and more we've certainly seen an uptake. We've seen the inflection point happen over the last 10 years. I really hope that this continues to accelerate. One, two, the other thing that I'm really hoping that happens over the next decade or so, I'd like to echo some of the things that Jeremy, Hamer, and Celestine have also talked about in terms of startups and open innovation. I would like to see us as an ecosystem embrace startups as a legitimate means of creating and capturing value in Singapore. And that's throughout the ecosystem, people believing, from students wanting to create startups to policymakers genuinely appreciating and backing the startups that are being created. So two things on my wish list: open innovation and embracing startups.
Thank you so much, Eugene. And that was really a fantastic finish to our 1 hour forum panel discussion. Thank you so much to all our panelists. Big round of applause. Give yourselves a big round of applause, please, 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 please. Take it away. All of you have been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. And of course, we hope that all your dreams and visions for university industry collaborations will come true. And I believe over the last hour, we pulled out all the best ingredients possible to usher in a golden era of successful university and industry collaborations and partnerships. And we hope you as the audience took something home as well that you can learn from and apply. Of course, moving on with our next program, we are going to be having a industry spotlight next, as well as a research showcase. So do stay tuned for that. This has been me, Wayne Chan, and enjoy the rest of your program. Thank you.